So you're on the road on a very long journey and it feels really good. The scenery is great. You like what you're doing. But then you realize that you haven't seen any mile markers, nothing indicating whether you're getting to where you want to go. Have you just been driving in circles? So in this video, we're going to give you the criteria to answer the question, how does your assessment strategy stack up to create maximal results in your longevity training practice? And so we're going to go through three subjects. Those subjects are the value of assessment. What are you going to get out of the assessment? What do you get out of doing this and putting your effort into this area? What assessments should you be doing? What assessments should everybody be doing? And how often should you be doing them? Okay, so the value of assessment, the primary value is to diagnose and determine the initial baseline state or condition that your body is in. Before you embark on, on your journey, we need to know where you're at. So we're going to do that in a variety of ways, with relationship to what outward indications are about where your state may be, if that makes sense. Basically, if you look like, if you seem like, if it seems like you're in very bad shape, then, we obviously don't want to be doing high performance tests. So those would be two ends of a spectrum. We want to find the tests that are very, very appropriate in the part of the spectrum of development that you should be taking those in, in order to see exactly where you're at and where you're starting. And so after the initial assessment that tells us where that baseline is, we need to know, feedback. We need to know feedback about how you're progressing. So we need to know, first and foremost, where you're at, what direction you're heading, and what speed you're going. So are you progressing fast? Are you progressing slow? Are you just maintaining? What's going on? Sometimes maintaining is just fine. It just depends on, what your goals are and what what our expectations are versus the resources you have at hand. One of those being your own physiology, your own genetics, your age, all that kind of stuff. And then this is going to help us focus and implement precise, customized action to significantly decrease the amount of time, effort, and money you might spend in your physical pursuits. Basically, if we make the project of you much less resource intensive by doing more assessment, then it's going to be it's going to happen much more faster, and it's going to be much more sustainable because we're going to create more precise results. We're going to get less, problematic results as well. Like your soreness. If you're sore after a workout, well, we'd rather not be sore and get the same results than be sore and get either the same or less results. That's just an example. And so an example is I had this one client. Her name was Allison, and she was a former athlete, and she had just hurt her ankle in one of those sort of circuit training type boot camp type classes. And, so she screwed it up pretty well. So she needed the rehab going into performance. And we had been working out for quite a little while, and she was doing great. She had gotten fully over her ankle injury, was really starting to rebalance her ankle knee hip complex, really getting coordinated, really getting, very nice results in terms of her ability to perform. So she was getting stronger and all that kind of stuff. Posture was getting better. Well, then one day she goes, "Hey, Jason, I just haven't seen the weight loss come." I started laughing. And I said, "Allison, first of all, we haven't been working on weight loss. But I have been giving you nutrition and, things to do. And, we've been talking about it a bit because that's where weight loss really comes from, is primarily the focus on the nutritional aspects of our programs. And, she's like, "Oh yeah, I've been doing it. I've been doing it." And I said, "Okay, well, let's start doing something here." And so I started doing three different measurements every time she came in, and there were three brief, just really easy measurements. But she knew she was being evaluated. And what would happen is that because she knew this, it would bring everything top of mind. And immediately, within a week, she was looking different. Within 2 weeks, she was seeing it on the scale. She was starting to lose weight. Within 3 weeks, she was starting to see significant weight loss along with feeling better, looking less inflamed. And I said, so Allison, what are you doing here? What's been going on? You told me that you were doing all this stuff. And now, and you said it just wasn't working. I said, but now we're measuring and you're getting all these results. What gives? And so she says, well, I was hijacking myself. There's these little actions that she was doing, like she had just had she had two young kids, and her young kids, she would take bites out of their food when she was feeding them. But then she would come into our appointments, and she'd say, she would forget. She was forgetting that she was doing that type of stuff. And so the feedback that we're getting from doing frequent assessment is actually keeping things top of mind. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's one of the important aspects of evaluation is it's those mile markers to set those milestones, not only in output, but in process. So it connects the process and the output together. All right. So the next thing we're going to look at is what to measure for longevity training. And there's three areas. We want to look at metabolic health, mechanical health or movement health, and we want to look at basic performance markers that are related, or the performance markers that are related to what your goal is. And so first, cardiometabolic health. Well, your basics are BMI, blood pressure, body composition, things like that. We also might want to look a little bit deeper at, your resting heart rate, your heart rate reserve, your heart rate variability, your resting metabolic rates. And, we're going to want to probably do a blood panel too that's related to all of those things. And getting what we call a functional range analysis done there. All right. And then we have mechanical health. Well, we want to look at mobility and stability. The thing is that stability is actually a component of mobility. So what we're really talking about when we say mobility is range of motion. We want to look at what the range of motion is. Functional mobility is the range of motion combined with and coordinated with a stabilization in order for your body to move without injury. And so we're going to do motion and pain tests to make sure every joint moves correctly. And you want to keep up these throughout a lifetime, so that we know that, you are significantly resilient to injury through mobility, or at least injury from like activities of daily living through mobility, throughout your lifetime. Because that is something that's actually, once attained, is pretty easy to maintain throughout life. And it's kind of the baseline of all longevity training programs. Usually these can be performed by a professional, but they are also able to be self-administered by a focused student, or after they are performed by a professional and taught to the student, then they can perform and you can perform them on your own. All right, the next area is performance tests. And so these performance tests, there's much more movement qualities than this, but you want strength, movement, cardiopulmonary, or cardiovascular if you want to use that term. But those are examples of what we call movement or physiological qualities. And there are many, many more. There are many more underlying qualities that you might want to look at. That might be coordination. It might be foot speed. It might be, reaction time, even eye movements, all sorts of things. But our major ones are strength, movement, and cardiopulmonary. And these are going to want to be related to the outcome that you're looking for. The primary outcome in longevity training is going to be pain resilience or injury resilience and resilience to chronic cardiometabolic diseases. And so the performance tests that we're talking about are primarily related to those. Anything above those, you want to relate to, what you want to do, at what level you're at, and what next level you want to achieve. For instance, the NFL Combine uses a series of tests in order to ascertain what the fitness and the strength of the athletes is in a variety of movement qualities, whether that be vertical jump or whether it be 40-yard dash time or how many times you can bench press a certain amount and all that kind of stuff. They find that is related to how you perform in professional football. We are going to do those. We're going to do something that's more related to, what you can do and what may be more related to where you're at. And so, they have to be, again, they have to be related to health, injury, resilience, or functional action, your functional capacity. And again, so we have strength. What kind of things might these be? Body weight strength. How many push-ups can you do? Gross strength, which would be, how much weight you can lift. Speed, core, how there you have core engagement, and you also have the strength of your core. How long could you do a plank? Something of that nature. Then you have balance. We have low level and high level for these. In movement, you might have agility. Movement we also call athleticism, by the way. Athleticism doesn't mean you have to be an athlete. We have done athleticism training and assessment with spinal cord injury people, and so that's the very lowest level of function really that a person can have. And so if, we're doing them with them, you can do movement centered assessments as well. And these are in agility, mobility, hand-eye coordination, foot coordination. They might even be on, eye movement, all sorts of stuff like that. And then your cardiopulmonary tests are going to be, it might be the, run for 12 minutes or walk for 12 minutes, or, it could be a variety of things. Breath test. It could be holding your breath type test. That doesn't mean that that's what we do necessarily, but that is a test that may be done. So now we want to talk about our third subject, and that is how often do we measure? Well, our longest period of time is yearly. So yeah, we want to have somebody in. We're going to go, okay, how have you done this year? How are you doing? Unfortunately, that's going to be a very robust test. That's going to have the most amount of tests. For instance, we referred to the NFL Combine. They do a yearly test, until you get to the point where they're just going to, you're not going to take the test anymore. They know that you're their person for the next year. But for most of us, yearly really isn't actionable. It doesn't give us enough feedback in order to really adjust our programs and our approach and our strategy. So we want to do a little bit more often, and then we're going to do quarterly. And quarterly is great to see how much a cycle of training is really producing. So if you decide that you want to do, these exercises for, 3-month amount of time and see what it produces at the end, in terms of a result, then that's what our quarterly is for. And that also is a very robust approach, meaning that we do a lot of things in it. That contrasts with a monthly assessment, which is a little bit less robust. We're probably going to be doing things that they aren't as much time intensive to actually do the assessment itself. So that's what the monthly is for. Weekly is going to be something brief. It might also be something where you're tracking what your output is, how you feel. For instance, a pain threshold test. What's my pain this week? How's it feel versus last week? Like a questionnaire, a sleep test, a sleep questionnaire. How much did you sleep? There's my thumb. How much did you sleep? How well did you sleep? Those are great questionnaire questions to really get to know. What's your body weight? Body weight, is something you could test weekly and is actionable. So these are some great things to be looking at. And then of course we have daily. And daily is measuring what are you feeling on a daily basis? It may be just like, how do I feel getting out of bed today? Now that might be a basic question. And so as you see, again, it has to be more and more and more brief, more and more time intensive. But one of the things we get out of the assessment is also focus. And we didn't mention that before, but I want to mention it now, that you get focus and attention on what you're trying to achieve by doing these assessments. And I talked a little bit about that in the stories that I told, about my client Allison and all that. And so these, so that's what the point of those were for. So, of course, assessment isn't going to help you as much if you don't know what kind of strategy you're going to try to implement and what kind of areas that you're going to try to set your approach for. And so we'll go over that in this video. It's up here or on the screen somewhere. So go ahead and click on that, and I'll see you there. Thanks.